The night he came, the wind howled so loud I could barely hear the horses in the barn. I'd been patching up an old saddle by the fire, counting the seconds between thunder and lightning, when I heard the crash outside, metal against rock. Then a groan that didn't belong to no animal. At first, I thought it was just another fallen branch, but something in that sound made my skin prickle. I grabbed Pa's lantern and stepped out into the storm. The rain hit me like needles. The road that led past our ranch was mostly empty this time of night, especially with the weather the way it was. But there, just beyond the fence, I saw a wagon overturned, its wheels half buried in the mud. And beside it, a man. He wasn't moving much, just a faint rise of his chest against the wet earth. I knelt beside him, the lantern trembling in my hands. "Sir, can you hear me?" No answer, just a groan, soft and broken. His face was bloodied, his shirt torn clean through one shoulder. I saw no badge, no tools, nothing to say who he was, except the kind of clothes that didn't belong to anyone from around here. Too fine, too clean, or at least, they had been before the rain got to them. I hooked my arms under his and dragged him toward the barn, the mud sucking at my boots the whole way. He was heavy, heavier than any ranch hand I'd ever hauled out of trouble. By the time I got him to the hay pile, my arms were shaking. Under the flicker of the lantern, I got a better look at him. Blonde hair matted with rain, a jaw too smooth to belong to a cowboy, and a watch, silver and gleaming even in the dirt. Rich, definitely rich. And what the hell was he doing out here, 10 miles from the nearest town? I tore a strip from my apron and wrapped it around his bleeding arm. When I touched his wrist to check for a pulse, I felt it, strong but fast. He was fighting for it. "Hold on, mister," I whispered, though I didn't know if he could hear me. "Ain't no sense dying in a place like this." Pa had always said, "Never turn away a stranger in need." So I dragged him inside the house, set him by the fire, and prayed the storm wouldn't take the roof off before morning. By dawn, the rain had stopped. The sun peeked through the clouds like it was shy. That's when he stirred, eyes fluttering open, blinking against the light. "Where am I?" he rasped. "My ranch," I said softly, handing him a cup of water. "You crashed near the fence last night." He looked around, confusion flickering across his face like he'd landed on another planet. Then his gaze found me and he froze. You saved me?" I nodded. He swallowed hard. "Thank you, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." He winced, clutching his side. "Don't talk," I told him. "You're hurt. Just rest," but he didn't. His eyes lingered, curious, searching, like he was trying to piece together how a girl in torn jeans and muddy boots ended up being the one who pulled him back from the edge. He didn't know yet who I was. And I sure didn't know who he was either. But something in that look told me, whatever world he came from, he wasn't going back to it anytime soon. When I woke up the next morning, the fire was cold, and so was the air. I found him still asleep on Pa's old cot, one arm hanging over the edge, the other wrapped tight around his ribs. He looked more like a lost boy than a grown man, the kind of soul that had never done a day's work in his life. I started breakfast, eggs and cornbread, the same thing I'd eaten every morning since Pa passed. The skillet hissed when I dropped the butter in, and that was enough to stir him awake. He blinked, dazed. "Where am I again?" "My place," I said without turning. "South end of Carson County, middle of nowhere if you're asking proper." He sat up slow, grimacing as he moved. "You dragged me out of that wreck?" "Wasn't much to drag," I said. "You were near dead weight, and I wasn't about to leave a man out there in the mud." He laughed softly, though it turned into a cough. "You've got more courage than sense." "Story of my life," I said, sliding him a plate. "Eat. Doctor's half a day away, and you'll need your strength." He stared at the food like it was a foreign object. Then he whispered, "You shouldn't have helped me." That caught me off guard. "Beg pardon?" He looked up then, eyes sharp, too bright for someone half broken. "If people knew where I was, if they found me here, you might get dragged into something you don't want." I leaned on the table, folding my arms. "Mister, you crashed on my land. The only thing I'm dragging myself into is your mess." He smiled faintly at that. "Fair enough." He hesitated, then added, "Name's Daniel." Just Daniel? Daniel Harlow. Something about it sounded familiar, like a name I'd heard whispered on the radio during election season, or printed on posters in town. I frowned. "Wait, Harlow as in," he sighed. "The governor's son." "Yeah." I stared at him, skillet still in my hand. "You're joking. Wish I was." He looked away, jaw tightening. They were sending me back to the Capitol for some public appearance. I didn't want to go. Got into an argument with my father. Took off on my own. Then the storm hit. "So you ran away," I said slowly. "I guess I did." The room fell quiet except for the crackle of the fire. I didn't know what to say. What does a ranch girl say to a man who's had everything but peace? Finally, I broke the silence. "Well, Daniel Harlow, run away or not, you're safe here. Nobody comes this far out." He looked at me then. Really looked. Like he was trying to figure out why I wasn't asking for money or favors or some reward. "I don't get it," he said softly. "Everywhere I go, people either want something from me or treat me like I'm made of gold. You're the first person who looked me in the eye and just told me to eat breakfast." I shrugged. "Gold don't mean much when it can't mend fences or feed horses. You're just a man who fell off a wagon to me." He smiled, a small, genuine thing that softened the edges of him. "Then maybe I'll stay that way for a while." I didn't know what he meant then. But when I looked into those tired blue eyes, I had the strange feeling that whatever world he'd come from, with its power and money and cameras, he wasn't in a hurry to go back. And maybe, deep down, I didn't want him to. By the third day, Daniel was well enough to walk around without wincing every step. I found him by the porch that morning, staring at the wide stretch of pasture like he'd never seen open land before. He looked out of place, city Polish standing in the middle of dust and sunlight. But there was something in his eyes that said he liked it. "You're up early," I said, carrying a bucket of feed. He smiled, squinting against the light. "Couldn't sleep. The quiet's too loud," I laughed. "You'll get used to it. Out here, silence talks more than people do." He followed me toward the barn, careful on his still sore leg. When he saw the fence leaning crooked near the south pen, he frowned. "That doesn't look safe." "It ain't," I said, setting down the bucket. "Been meaning to fix it since last month. Storm made it worse. Let me help." I raised a brow. "You ever held a hammer before, city boy?" He chuckled. "I've signed a few bills. Does that count?" Not even close. Still, he picked up the hammer like he was determined to prove something. I stood by, arms crossed, watching him line up a nail and miss it 3 times before finally getting it halfway in. He swore under his breath, which made me laugh so hard I almost dropped the wire spool. "Guess I'm not built for this," he muttered. "Nope," I said, grinning, "but I'll give you points for trying." He wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked at me, a playful spark in his eyes. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" "Maybe a little," I teased. "I don't get to see a governor's son wrestle with barbed wire every day." He laughed, a real full laugh that rolled through the air like thunder without the storm. And for a moment, he didn't look like a man running from anything. He just looked free. We worked side by side till noon. He wasn't strong, not in the way ranch hands were, but he had determination, and that counted for something. Every time he cursed at the hammer or dropped a nail, I'd shake my head and hand him another, and he'd grin like he was winning some invisible battle. When we finished, the fence stood straight again. I leaned on the post and handed him a canteen. "Not bad for a politician's boy." He took a drink, still catching his breath. "Feels good. Doing something real." I tilted my head. "Real?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah. Back home, everything's talk, meetings, speeches, promises. None of it means much. But this..." He gestured toward the field, the repaired fence, the dirt on his hands. "This is honest. It hurts, but it's honest." For a second, I didn't know what to say. No man had ever looked at my small, half-broken ranch and called it honest. But hearing it from him, the governor's son, the man born into silk and silver, made something warm stir in my chest. I caught him staring then, eyes softer than before. "What?" I asked, feeling heat creep up my neck. He smiled. "Just, you make this place feel like home." I turned away, pretending to fuss with the bucket. Careful, Daniel. You talk like that, and I'll think you're starting to like it here. He stepped closer, his voice low. Maybe I already do. For a few days, things felt easy, almost peaceful. Daniel helped me feed the horses, patch the barn roof, and haul water from the creek. He wasn't good at any of it, not really, but he learned fast, and he laughed even faster. There was something healing about having another voice around the ranch. For years, it had just been me, the chores, the wind, and the silence. Now there was someone humming off-key in the morning, asking questions about ranch life, getting into trouble with a stubborn mule named Dusty. But peace never lasts long in small towns. By the end of the week, word started to spread. It began with old Mrs. Carter, who lived half a mile down the road. She'd seen Daniel fixing the fence shirtless under the sun and went running to town like she'd found gold. By the next morning, the folks at the feed store were whispering about the stranger staying at my place. And in Carson County, whispers grow faster than wild grass after rain. When I went into town for supplies, people looked at me different. Some smiled, some frowned, some asked too many questions. "Who's that fine-looking fella helping you at the ranch?" one of the shopkeepers asked with a smirk. "Just a friend passing through," I said, keeping my voice even. "Friend, huh?" he drawled. "Well, if all friends looked like that, I reckon half the county'd be lonely no more." I ignored the teasing, but inside, I felt a flicker of worry. If word reached the wrong ears, like the sheriff, or worse, someone connected to the governor, things could turn ugly fast. When I got home, Daniel was out by the corral, brushing Dusty. His sleeves were rolled up, hair falling into his eyes, that city boy charm softening into something rugged. It was unfair, really, how easy he fit here now. "You went to town?" he asked. "Yeah, and you might want to stay out of sight for a bit." He frowned. "Why?" "Because folks around here got big mouths and small lives. They saw you, and now they're talking." He sighed, setting down the brush. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I know, but trouble don't care about meaning." He was quiet for a while, then said softly, "If anyone asks, I'll leave. I don't want to bring you grief." The words stung more than I expected. I crossed my arms, trying to sound calm. "You don't have to run every time things get messy, Daniel. You're not out there alone anymore." He looked at me then, really looked, and something passed between us. Quiet and heavy. "I'm not used to people standing up for me," he said. "Then you better start getting used to it," I replied, though my heart was thudding hard. That night, I found him sitting by the porch again, watching the stars. The air was cool and the smell of hay carried on the wind. He turned when he heard me. "Back home," he said quietly. "Everybody knows my name before I say it. Out here, I feel like I can just be." I sat beside him. "That's 'cause names don't mean much when the land don't care who you are. It only listens if you work for it," he smiled faintly. "Then maybe I'll earn my place here." I didn't say anything, but deep down, I already knew. If he kept talking like that, I might not want him to leave at all. And I wasn't sure what scared me more. The rumors in town. Or the way my heart started to hope for something impossible. The morning the sheriff came, the sky was too quiet. No birds, no wind. Just the kind of silence that makes your gut twist before trouble hits. I was out back splitting wood when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Dust rose in a slow swirl as the old county truck pulled up. Sheriff Collins stepped out, his hat low, boots heavy with mud. He'd been sheriff longer than I'd been alive, and he had that look. The one that said he noticed everything, even the lies you hadn't told yet. "Mornin', Miss Walker," he said, tipping his hat. "Heard you've had some company lately." I wiped the sweat off my neck with my sleeve. "Depends who's askin'." He gave a slow grin. "Just a friendly check-in. Folks in town been talkin'? Said there's a stranger stayin' with you. Tall fella, fair hair, don't look like he's from around here." I forced a small laugh. You know how folks in Carson County are. They'd gossip about a new cow if it looked too fancy. Collins leaned on the fence. "You're not wrong about that. Still, I gotta make sure everything's square. Governor's people came through last night, looking for his boy. Seems he went missing after a wreck out near the old highway. My heart dropped to my boots. I kept my face still. That so? He nodded. That so. They're saying he might be hurt. Some think he's dead. He studied me a moment too long. You seen anyone fit that description? I swallowed, gripping the axe handle a little too tight. Can't say I have, Sheriff. Just me and the horses out here. He squinted, then gave a slow nod. All right then. But if you see something or someone, you let me know, hear? Ain't good getting tangled in other folks' business. Yes, sir. He tipped his hat again, climbed back in his truck, and rolled down the road, leaving a trail of dust behind him. I didn't breathe till he was out of sight. Inside, I found Daniel pacing near the window. He must have heard everything. His face was pale, eyes wide with guilt. They're looking for me, he said. My father must have sent half the state after me. You need to calm down, I said, closing the door. If you run now, you'll only draw more eyes. I can't stay, not with them so close. I stepped closer, voice low but firm. Daniel, you're in no shape to travel, and if they find you on the road, they'll drag you back before you can say goodbye. Here, you're safe. Nobody'll come snooping twice. He looked at me, torn between fear and something softer. Why are you doing this for me? I hesitated, because I saw the way his eyes changed when he laughed, because he worked hard even when his hands blistered, because for the first time in a long time, the ranch didn't feel empty, but all I said was, 'cause everyone deserves a place to heal. He stared at me, like he wanted to say something, and something big, something dangerous. But instead he whispered, You're going to get yourself in trouble. Wouldn't be the first time, I said, smiling faintly. That night the storm rolled back in. Thunder rumbled over the hills, and rain drummed on the roof. Daniel stood by the window, watching lightning split the sky, while I sat by the fire pretending not to watch him. I should go, he murmured, more to himself than to me. I met his gaze. Then why haven't you? He didn't answer. Just turned back to the storm, jaw tight, shoulders trembling, not from pain, but from wanting something he couldn't name. And I knew then that no matter how many men his father sent, Daniel Harlow wasn't ready to go home. Not yet. Not while his heart still had something to stay for. After the sheriff's visit, Daniel changed. He stopped pacing by the windows, stopped flinching every time he heard a truck pass on the road. Instead, he threw himself into the work like a man trying to build a new version of himself, one nail, one beam at a time. The barn had been falling apart since before the storm. The roof sagged, the doors hung crooked, and every gust of wind made it creak like it was whispering its last prayer. I'd patched it as best I could, but it was more wish than wood holding it together. When Daniel said he wanted to fix it, I laughed. You sure you don't want to start with something easier? Like, say, not getting splinters? He grinned, hammer in hand. If I'm staying here, I want to pull my weight. You already did when you scared the sheriff half to death by hiding under that tarp, I teased. He chuckled. Yeah, well, maybe I'd rather be remembered for building something than hiding from the law. So we worked. Every day after sunrise, we rebuilt the barn together. The first few mornings, he hit his thumb more times than the nails, and I laughed until I cried. But by the end of the week, he'd gotten the hang of it. Arms steady, jaw set, that stubborn streak shining through. There was something beautiful about watching him work. Not the way men from town showed off their muscles, but quiet, patient strength. Every strike of his hammer was full of purpose, like he was nailing down a reason to stay. By noon one day, sweat slicked his hair, and dirt streaked his cheek. He looked more ranch hand than politician's son. You're not half bad, I said, leaning on the post. Give it a month and you'll pass for one of us. He wiped his brow, grinning. Guess that's a compliment. It is. Not everyone can survive this place. He looked at me then, that soft, searching look again. You did, I shrugged. Had to. He set down the hammer and stepped closer. I don't think I've ever met anyone like you, Clara. The sound of my name in his voice did something to me. Something warm and dangerous. You say that like it's a bad thing. He smiled. No, like it's the best thing that ever happened to me. For a moment, we just stood there, dust in the air, sunlight slanting through the gaps in the boards, our hearts beating too loud. I could have sworn the whole world held its breath. Then I looked away, breaking the spell. "You better finish that roof before sunset, or the horses will sleep wetter than we will." He laughed, but I saw the flicker of something deeper behind it. Longing, maybe, or gratitude. Later that evening, when the barn stood proud again under the orange glow of dusk, he leaned on the fence beside me. "You know," he said, "I used to think fixing things meant replacing them. But out here, it feels more like mending, making do with what you've got. That's harder. It's also worth more," I said quietly. "Anyone can buy new. Not everyone knows how to keep something alive." He nodded, eyes soft. "Guess that's what you did for me." I blinked, pretending not to understand. "What do you mean?" He smiled faintly. "You didn't just patch me up. You made me feel human again." I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. I just stood there beside him as the crickets started to sing and the stars came out one by one, like even the night wanted to listen. And though I didn't tell him, I knew he was right. He fixed my barn, sure, but somewhere between the laughter, the work, and the quiet, I'd started fixing his heart. And maybe, without meaning to, he'd started fixing mine too. I felt it before I saw it. That heavy quiet, the kind that comes before a storm. Only this time it wasn't thunder rolling in, it was engines. 2 black trucks came down the dirt road that morning, kicking up dust like a warning. I was out feeding the horses when I saw them, shiny, clean, and far too polished for our part of the world. And standing tall in front of them when the doors opened was a man I recognized from every news article and campaign poster in the county, Governor Richard Harlow. Daniel's father. My stomach dropped. Daniel was by the barn, hammer in hand. The moment he saw the trucks, the color drained from his face. "They found me," he muttered under his breath. Before I could say anything, the governor was already walking toward us, boots crunching in the dirt. His suit was pressed, his tie perfect, but his eyes were hard, like steel that hadn't rusted in years. "Daniel." His voice carried like it belonged to every room he ever entered. "You've caused enough trouble." Daniel straightened, but I saw his hands tremble slightly. "I wasn't trying to... Do you have any idea what you've done?" His father cut in. "Reporters, search parties, police. Half the state thinks you're dead. You've embarrassed this family." Again, the words hit like lashes. I saw Daniel flinch, then glance at me, just for a second, before his father noticed. "And who's this?" Governor Harlow turned to me, scanning me from my muddy boots to my calloused hands. "The girl who kept my son from coming home?" Something about the way he said it made my blood heat. "Your son was half dead when I found him. I didn't keep him from anything. I saved his life." The governor's gaze sharpened. "And what did you want in return, miss?" "Walker," I said. "Clara Walker, and I don't take payment for being decent." He stared at me like he couldn't decide if I was brave or stupid. "Decent," he repeated, almost scoffing. "My son doesn't belong here." Daniel stepped forward then. "Maybe that's not your choice anymore." The governor blinked, taken aback. "What did you just say?" "I said I'm not a child, Father. You sent people to find me like I was some lost possession. I needed space. Away from the cameras. Away from your expectations. Out here I can breathe." The governor's jaw tightened. "Breathe? This is dirt and poverty, Daniel. Not a life." I bit my tongue, but Daniel didn't. "Maybe that's what you never understood," he said, voice shaking but firm. "Out here people work. They care. Clara didn't know who I was, and for once that felt good. Real." The air between them crackled. The governor glanced at me again, expression unreadable. "You're leaving with me. Now." Daniel looked at me. Just a look, but it said everything. Do I go? Do I stay? I wanted to tell him to stay, but I also knew some things couldn't be stopped by wanting alone, so I just whispered, "Do what feels right." He hesitated, chest rising and falling fast. Then, softly but surely, he said, "No." The governor's face darkened. "Daniel, no, Father," he repeated. "I'm not leaving. Not yet." The men behind the governor shifted uneasily. The silence stretched until the older man finally exhaled, slow and sharp. "You have 1 week. Then I'm coming back. He turned, boots grinding into the dirt, and climbed into his truck without another word. The engines roared, and just like that, they were gone. Daniel stood there for a long while, staring down the road where they disappeared. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. He's not going to give up, I figured, I said softly. Men like him never do. He looked at me then, tired but sure. Then I guess I'll just have to give him a reason to. And I knew, no matter what happened next, Daniel wasn't just hiding anymore. He was choosing, and somehow, without meaning to, he'd chosen me. After the governor's visit, the ranch felt different. Quieter, heavier, like the wind itself was holding its breath. Daniel didn't say much for days. He worked from sunrise till dark, barely pausing even to eat. I watched him from the porch sometimes, hammer in hand, sweat dripping down his neck, the weight of his father's shadow still following him. But one evening, just as the sun dipped behind the hills and the air turned gold, he came to me. I was sitting by the fence mending a broken rein. The smell of hay and wild sage filled the air. He stood there a moment before speaking, his voice low and rough. "Clara, can we talk?" I looked up. "Sure. You look like you got ghosts chasing you." He gave a tired smile. "Feels that way." He sat beside me, close enough that I could smell the faint trace of smoke and cedar on his shirt. For a long moment, neither of us said a word. The cicadas buzzed in the trees, the sky turning soft pink above the hills. Then he finally said, "There's something I haven't told you." I frowned. I figured there might be. Folks with families like yours always got secrets. This one's worse than most. He took a deep breath. My father, he's not just strict. He's powerful, controlling. Everything he touches, he owns. He used me like a piece in his game. Every speech, every photo, every perfect Sun headline, it was all him. I didn't get to live my life. I just played his part. His voice broke a little at the end, and it hurt to hear. He went on. The night I crashed, it wasn't an accident. I was running from him. He wanted me to marry someone, some senator's daughter, to tie two families together. I told him no. He didn't take that well. I felt my chest tighten. "He forced you?" He looked down. "He tried. So I took the truck and drove till I couldn't anymore. Guess fate had other plans. The fireflies had started to flicker in the grass, tiny lights dancing between us. I didn't know what to say. I'd seen control before, in men who thought money gave them the right to own everything around them. But hearing it from Daniel, who'd carried it so quietly all this time, made my heart ache. "Daniel," I said softly, "you don't owe him your life. You got the right to live it how you want, even if that means staying here in the dust with the likes of me." He turned then, eyes glistening in the twilight. "You really think I belong here?" I smiled faintly. "You've already proved it. The barn stands 'cause of you. The horses like you. And, well, I don't mind having you around either." He laughed under his breath, that quiet, breathless laugh that always made my stomach flutter. "You've got no idea what you've done for me, Clara." He reached for my hand, slow, almost shy. His fingers were rough now, scarred from days of ranch work. They felt real, honest. "I came here lost," he said, voice trembling. "But you made me feel like I'm worth something more than my last name." I wanted to answer, but the words caught in my throat. So I just held his hand tighter, my heart beating too fast, too loud. The world around us faded. No governors, no whispers, no storm. Just two souls sitting in the quiet, finding something that felt a lot like peace, and maybe something even deeper than that. When he finally stood to leave, he hesitated, his thumb brushing the back of my hand. "I don't know what's going to happen when my father comes back," he said softly. "But I need you to know, whatever he says, whatever he does, this right here is the only thing that's ever felt real." And before I could breathe, he leaned in and pressed a soft kiss to my forehead. Then he walked away into the dark, leaving me sitting there, heart wide open, knowing everything had just changed. The next few days crawled by like wounded snakes. Every creak of the windmill, every distant hum of an engine made my stomach twist. I knew the governor would come back. Men like him always keep their word when it's about control. Daniel tried to act calm. He worked the ranch as usual, helped mend the gate, brushed the horses. But his eyes were different now, like he was counting the hours until something broke. On the 6th day, it happened. 2 more black trucks pulled up the road again, same dust, same authority. But this time, the governor didn't come alone. He brought men in suits, 3 of them, and 1 reporter holding a camera. I walked out onto the porch before they could reach the barn. "You don't belong here," I said, my voice steady even though my heart was hammering. Governor Harlow took off his sunglasses slowly. "Neither does my son." Daniel stepped out from behind the barn then, wiping his hands on his jeans, eyes fixed on his father. "If you came to drag me back, save your breath." The governor's face didn't move. "I came to give you a choice." He nodded toward one of the suited men, who stepped forward holding a folder. "In here is a contract. You come back home, make your public appearance, and this story ends quietly. The press gets their family reunion photo, and the world forgets your little disappearance." Daniel crossed his arms. "And if I say no?" The governor's gaze slid toward me, sharp as a knife. "Then I release a statement. I tell every paper in Texas that a poor ranch girl manipulated my son into staying here. That you used him, took advantage of his kindness, maybe even his injury. And believe me, Miss Walker, people will believe it." I felt the ground tilt under me. My throat went dry, but I didn't look away. "You wouldn't." He smirked. "You don't know what I'd do to protect my family's name." Daniel's jaw clenched. "Stop it." "Then sign it," the governor snapped. "End this foolishness. You've had your rebellion. It's time to come home." Daniel stepped closer, his voice low but burning. "You think control is love, but it's not. I'm done being your puppet." "Daniel, no!" he shouted, loud enough to echo off the hills. "You don't get to decide who I am anymore." The governor's men shifted uneasily. The air was so tense it could have snapped in 2. I wanted to reach for him, to say something, but before I could, the governor's expression hardened like stone. "You'll regret this," he said coldly. "And so will she." He turned, motioning for his men to leave. The trucks roared back to life, kicking dust into the sky until the horizon disappeared behind it. When they were gone, Daniel sank onto the porch steps, his shoulders shaking. I knelt beside him. "You did what you had to." He laughed bitterly. "Yeah, and now I've probably destroyed your life too." I touched his arm. "Let him talk. Let the world spin its stories. Folks around here may gossip, but they know the truth when they see it. And I know what kind of man you really are." He looked at me then, eyes tired, but alive again. "What kind of man's that?" "The kind who stayed." He swallowed hard, then whispered, "I'd stay for you." My heart stuttered in my chest. For a long moment, we just sat there, the ranch quiet around us, the sunset bleeding gold over the horizon. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Maybe reporters, maybe ruin. But for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. Because the man sitting beside me wasn't just a governor's son anymore. He was mine, for however long fate would allow. A month passed since the governor's trucks disappeared into the dust. No letters, no reporters, no men in suits. Just silence. The kind that makes you realize how much noise power really makes when it's gone. Daniel stayed. At first, I thought maybe he was just waiting, that someday he'd pack his bag, drive down the dirt road, and vanish into that world again. But he didn't. He woke up with the roosters, helped mend fences, fed the calves, and laughed with the other ranch hands like he'd been one of us his whole life. He still got stares when we went into town. Folks whispered, the governor's boy living with the ranch girl. But it didn't matter. Daniel didn't hide anymore. He looked people in the eye and smiled, free in a way I don't think he ever had before. One evening, I found him out by the old cottonwood tree, shirt sleeves rolled up, paint streaking his arms. "What are you up to?" I asked, wiping my hands on my apron. He grinned, a little sheepish. "Fixing this old sign. Thought the ranch could use a proper name." He turned it around, and I froze. It said, Second Chance Ranch. I laughed, tears threatening to fall. "That's real corny, you know that?" "Maybe," he said, smiling wider. "But it's the truth." We stood there in the fading light, cicadas singing all around us. I could see the sun catching the edges of his hair, turning it gold. There was something in his eyes. Soft, sure. He took my hands, rough and scarred from months of work, but steady as the land beneath us. "I used to think home was a place with marble floors and security guards," he said quietly. "But it's not. It's this. You. The smell of hay. The sound of the horses. The way you look at me like I'm just me." I couldn't stop the tears then. "You sure you don't miss it? The big house, the easy life?" He shook his head. "I'd rather wake up to roosters and dirt than go back to a world where I can't breathe." He leaned in then, his forehead touching mine. The wind moved around us like a whisper, carrying the smell of rain and wild grass. And when he kissed me, slow, gentle, real, I knew the truth I'd been too scared to say out loud. He wasn't going back. Not to the mansion, not to the cameras, not to the father who saw him as an asset instead of a son. He'd found something bigger out here. Not wealth, not power, but peace. And maybe, just maybe love. That night, the lanterns flickered in the barn and the stars filled the sky. He pulled me close and said, "If I ever go anywhere again, it'll be with you." And I believed him, because sometimes the richest thing a man can do is walk away from everything he owns and choose the life that makes him feel alive. So no, Daniel Harlow never went back home, because somewhere between the dust and the wildflowers he already found one. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more unforgettable tales from me. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss a new episode. Thanks for watching.